We've heard what drones can bring us, but flying cameras also pose serious privacy and safety concerns that will require new regulations and policies to protect the public. But it's not all doom and gloom. Drones may have a very constructive role to play in our future as well. And joining us now with more, Ontario's former Privacy Commissioner Anne Cavoukian, now Executive Director at the Institute for Privacy and Big Data at Ryerson University. Dave Kretsch is here. He is co-founder and CEO of Arian Labs in Waterloo. Ian Hanna is Director of Operations for Industrial Skyworks. And we welcome back technology consultant Jesse Hirsch, and it's good to have everybody around our table today here in Leaside, Ontario. We will get to the Orwellian doom and gloom business that I know you all want to talk about. However, let's just set up this potentially more constructive look at our future. And to do that, here's the CEO of MatterNet. Watch the monitors here in the studio. We've got a clip. Roll tape.
Imagine 1 billion people being connected to physical goods in the same way that mobile telecommunications connected them to information. Imagine if the next big network we built in the world was a network for the transportation of matter. In the developing world, we would hope to reach millions of people with better vaccines, reach them with better medication. It would give us an unfair advantage against battling HIV/AIDS, tuberculosis, and other epidemics. Over time, we would hope it would become a new platform for economic transactions, lifting millions of people out of poverty.
So that's a rather different and rather constructive, rather more constructive view of what drones can do in the future. You make them, right?
That's right.
And I want to find out what you, when you first started making them, thought your market would be.
Well, when we founded the company, we wanted to find a way to bring technology, really that you've only ever seen either in the lab at a university or on the battlefield, to what we saw as an emerging market in the commercial world. We saw everything from precision agriculture through to surveying or police work as a brand new opportunity that was uncaptured. So in talking to users, the big challenge was systems had to be easy to use. There's been a hobby community out there for years using remote control systems, but that's got to change in order for the average person to pick this up and use this as a tool instead of a toy.
The drones you make are how big?
We have a 3-pound version and a 5-pound version, so it's quite small, designed for the backpack of the soldier, trunk of the police car.
And they sell for what?
They range between $50,000 and $200,000, depending on how you have them kitted out.
You making a living?
Yeah, a good one.
Okay.
Right place at the right time.
Gotcha. Ian, you flew one of these things.
Yes.
Under what circumstances?
Well, we have various operations with them, but our main operations with these kind of drones right now is actually in roof inspections. Large roof inspections. So large commercial roofs require inspection. They get water, they leak. Now, using a drone, we can actually scan that roof very, very quickly, determine if there's any anomalies in the roof, if there's any kind of wet areas. Presently, they have to send up people in the dark at night to walk on these roofs to find this kind of stuff. So now we de-risk the project. We take people off the roof. We send a drone up very quickly. We can ascertain if the roof needs replacing.
And do your drones look like his drones?
They are his drones.
They are his drones. So I guess that would be a yes.
Yes, exactly.
You also did, now you've got a connection to the Polar Sea documentary that we've got on TVO coming up in December, right?
That's correct.
Okay,
that's
so
correct.
Tell us what role they played in that.
The Polar Sea was a really interesting project. We were doing the 360-degree video of the Arctic. We decided to take some drones with us and put the camera systems actually on the drone to fly them over things that hadn't been flown over before. There were certainly some challenges as you get further north. Drones and compasses are not best friends. So we certainly had some issues, but we did get some amazing footage over the glaciers in Greenland, where you'll see, if you go to the website, you'll be able to see the drones themselves flying, flying nicely over the glacier, and be able to look around in complete 360 degrees. So very innovative, both technologies using drones and 360 video. So it turned out to be, it's still, I think, to say it's not out yet, but I mean, what we've seen of it so far looks spectacular.
Polar Sea, December, on TVO. Everybody watch.
Don't miss it, trust me. It's,
exactly.
The websites, this will be all website stuff. The 360 is not for TV, of course, but it's the 360 is a technology for web.
We heard a reference to agriculture earlier, Jesse. Fill that blank in. What does that mean?
Well, it's another huge area in which drones, I think, have interesting commercial application. There's a company called Precision Hawk, which, while based in North Carolina, actually has its roots at the University of Toronto. And Hamilton's Bob Young is one of the major investors.
Owner of the Ticats.
Indeed. And they produce an interesting drone that kind of resembles a paper airplane, although larger, in that it's not like a quadrotor that goes straight up. You sort of toss it like an airplane, and it then goes over your fields of your farm and has both sensors and software that can both map out the field in terms of monitoring growth, looking for pests. And the idea is it allows a more surgical application of pesticides, a more intelligent way of managing your fields, and has become quite popular for farmers as another way of crop management in which literally they can do this type of analysis by going to the air rather than having to go through all their fields physically.
So this sounds great, which is why we bring the former Information and Privacy Commissioner in right now to tell us about the concerns that you have learned about in the, how many years did you do that job? You had a long time there.
Over 20 years.
20 years as the Information and Privacy Commissioner, and now in your gig at Ryerson University. So what concerns you about all of this?
So Steve, it's not an either-or proposition. This is what always bothers me. A new technology develops, it's fabulous, and people say, okay, well, you know, it's wonderful, look at all these wonderful purposes it serves, so I guess we have to say goodbye to privacy. No, you can do both. What could go wrong? Think about the potential, especially the smaller they get, so there's some insect-sized drones, I understand, to potentially engage in surveillance of within your home. Your home is your castle. It's the last bastion of privacy. So how is it that these drones could capture data in a window of your house, potentially your bedroom? There was actually a case like that in Seattle. A woman complained she saw this drone. Here it is by my bedroom window. She looks out the window, and there's a gentleman. He's on the street, and he says, "Look, lady, I'm on public property. I'm not on your personal property. There's no issue here." The hell there isn't. There's a big issue. You are engaging in domestic surveillance, and that's the issue. We have to develop systems, policies, and laws that ensure that all the wonderful uses of the drones that you outlined are permitted, but they don't trespass onto people's activities, behavior, or privacy.
Can I understand that example you just gave from Seattle? No laws were broken there as that guy on the street, standing on public property, was spying on his neighbor.
Because these are new areas. These are new, the laws I'm sure will evolve, as will our ability to address this issue. But just 10 days ago in the US Supreme Court, Justice Sotomayor, she did a talk on drones. She said, we have enormous issues. We have to be concerned about privacy and the domestic surveillance potential for these unmanned aerial vehicles, drones. So we need to alert people that there are lots of wonderful uses. I applaud them, but here's where it stops and here's where it cannot go. And the area of domestic surveillance in the states, in the US, 36 states have already introduced legislation to prohibit the use of drones for purposes of domestic surveillance absent a warrant. 13 of those states have already enacted that legislation.
Ian, fair to say, I mean, we're already seeing this kind of stuff at, who was it? Tina Turner's wedding, I think. Paparazzi had the drones going overhead to try to sort of spy on things that they weren't invited to. Does that pose any concerns for you?
Well, as you probably know, I also represent Professional Society of Drone Journalists.
Say that again, because I can't imagine people know that exists.
Well, no, Professional Society of Drone Journalists. It's an organization that we've set up to really kind of help journalists through some of these issues, because there is, you know, absolutely some privacy issues to be addressed. And there's concerns, you know, with paparazzi using drones inappropriately. I mean, that's not the role of our organization, is to steer people away from that and give them a solid, you know, understanding of what this technology can do. It absolutely does concern me when paparazzi are, are probably everyone's least favorite sort of sense of media, and they have the perfect tool now to go out and spy and be invasive of people. It does concern me, massively. The question is, how do you regulate that? How do you stop that? I think people have been asking themselves about paparazzi for 100 years, and the paparazzi keeps finding ways of getting around it. I think this tool will be equally as hard to deal with them. It's not to say we shouldn't try, or we shouldn't, be putting regulation or some laws in place to make sure that try not to happen. But we are facing a very determined group of people when you talk of paparazzi. But that doesn't apply to, I should put out to other journalists, other people who are using this technology in a very appropriate way for, the public good, for, dissemination of information.
Sure, but let me quote celebrity photographer Giles Harrison, who said in the LA Times the other day, "There are certain lines that paparazzi shouldn't cross, and I feel that the use of drones to photograph celebrities more than crosses that line." What do you think, Jesse?
Well, it strikes me when Anne was describing the scenario of having someone come into your house via drone, I thought of the glass towers here in Toronto and how a lot of these towers were designed with the idea that no one can see in at 20 stories, 30 stories. So it's a different sense of publicness, along with our expectation of privacy. And so for a drone to fly up and be able to really see into an urban design that did not anticipate drones really does suggest that there are dynamics to which, on the one hand, we're building glass condos that assume no one can see in, and yet the technology to see in is all of a sudden becoming cheaper and more affordable. So I think part of it is laws, but part of it's culture.
Yes.
I mean, if you're on the subway and you take out your smartphone and you take a photo of someone, it may be public space, but the issue of consent comes up.
That's problematic, isn't it?
So it's almost as if we need to have that same sense of consent. Leaving your drapes open does not mean that you consent to having someone spy on you. So it's important that I think we have these conversations as the technology becomes easier to use.
Dave, what's your view?
Yeah, you know, the regulations will only stop the people that follow the law, right? Imagine, or think about when cameras first were added to cell phones, right? And all of the privacy concerns that came up at that time, the locker room photos and the whatever else. Okay, so as a culture, we've changed. Okay, maybe you just don't bring your phone out and you're not texting, you know, facing someone in the locker room, right? There's probably, or there already are, a handful of guidelines that people are breaking. If you're flying downtown Toronto with your drone, you're not obeying the model aviation guidelines when you're flying recreationally, for example. This is an area that you shouldn't be flying. So you're already breaking those guidelines. The chances of you following another law in that case, you know, aren't particularly high.
Well, do we need more laws on this, given that, I mean, we're right. These examples of the locker room, nobody pulls out a smartphone and takes a picture in a gym locker room now. Do we really need, because they just know that's not the right thing to do. So do we need laws here?
The reason I think you do need some prohibitions in the form of laws, regulations, is because people will use, you know, that Seattle example, people will use cameras to invade people's privacy in their homes where it's completely unacceptable. But then I was just talking to Ian earlier, the use of the drones to look at the rooftops for very valuable purposes. And he was saying, yeah, but you know, often the rooftops at the top of apartment buildings, they have to go up the building and there's people's homes. And I said, okay, so what we could do is we could devise systems where you could alert the individuals. The drone's not going to be recording anything until it gets to the top. So don't concern yourself if you see a drone outside your window. The data capture is only intended for the top. And then you have an independent third party attest to that.
So do you need a regulation to deal with that?
I think Dave's right. The regulations won't make everyone do it, obviously, but I think it sets the tone of what is acceptable and unacceptable. Ideally, you shouldn't have to have a regulation, but the reality is that sort of puts the line in the sand, and if you cross that, you have some consequences. So this would just assist that. Ideally, I would like proactive protections embedded into these technologies.
Meaning what?
So something called privacy by design is all about trying to prevent the privacy harms from arising. I mean, imagine eventually if you could have drones that could self-indicate, we're not capturing your information, we're just going to the top. That's just one simple example, but some way to allay people's fears that there's no intention of capturing data in terms of domestic surveillance purposes. This camera is intended to capture the stuff at the roof. That's one silly example, but there are ways to do that, and if we spent time on this, I'm sure we could find a variety of ways that you could try to minimize the privacy harms from arising to begin with.
Did I read right? Have you sold drones to the Halton Regional Police?
Yeah, that's correct, yeah.
What are they using them for?
Traffic accident reconstruction is probably one of the biggest uses, but search and rescue, tactical scenarios, you know, there's really a ton of applications, and we have our product actually in use with the OPP, and they've taken traffic accident reconstruction from an hour and a half as sort of the typical time down to about 10 to 15 minutes. So the 401 is opened that much faster.
And Steve, if I could add, the OPP, very respectful of privacy. They've talked to us about, my former office, about the drones. They really want to ensure that the privacy is embedded into the system and used for authorized purposes like the ones you mentioned.
Can I push back on that a bit?
Yes.
OPP using drones to monitor protests in eastern Ontario on the Tyonendaga First Nation.
They didn't mention that to us.
That's, you don't say. I mean, would you say that's not kosher?
As I said, I wasn't aware of that. But the point is that, so maybe you do need, at the very least, a very strong policy We don't have the laws yet. But you see, OPP, law enforcement is very good at following laws. So maybe you have to engage this in regulation for purposes like that.
There have been airborne law enforcement regulations and guidelines for years. Ever since airplanes were invented, law enforcement has been conducted by aircraft in one form or another. Yes. Right? So the rules around what's admissible, when you need a warrant, what you can do from the air, that's sort of a well-established.
But they should have a warrant for purposes like this, and that should extend to that.
I think Anne also brings up a really interesting point around how the drone communicates to anyone who sees it. In that drones are already using wireless communication to operate, right? There has to be a connection between the operator and the drone itself. So why couldn't you have, for example, a regulation that says drones must communicate, say via Wi-Fi, to anyone within range as to its purpose? So it says, I'm here to scan roofs, or I'm here to check crops, or I'm here to reconstruct traffic. So that just like a website has to have a privacy policy that you can go and read what's saying, perhaps drones should be wirelessly communicating to anyone in range exactly what their purpose is. So that if it didn't, you could report it. And you could say there was suspicious activity in my neighborhood, the drone was not communicating what was going on. And you could answer whether the industry would do that on its own, but that's an example of a regulation that would be easy to comply with.
So as an example, that's not that far off from what's happening in aviation guidelines through access to airspace. If I'm a pilot, my concern is running into a drone. I mean, we've heard of stories this operating outside JFK Airport. So in my case, I'm another pilot operating in the area. I want to know what drones are in my region, what altitude are they operating at, so I can avoid them. That's not that different from what you're proposing on the privacy side.
Yeah. You're the guy here with the Drone Journalist Association. Do you think there's any justification for the police using drones to sort of monitor protests?
I think there could be there could be a lot of justification. Perhaps it's safer than sending the police up in a full-size helicopter. Perhaps it's a lot cheaper. Those are two very good justifications, in my opinion, because right now they can do that. I mean, really, what the question to ask is, would there be a difference from a jet ranger flying around with a policeman hanging out the side to a drone? I mean, it's certainly a lot cheaper and it's costing the taxpayer a lot less money.
And a lot less intrusive and threatening, perhaps, as well.
There's that, too. I don't know. I mean, you can put a jet ranger up at 2,000 feet and with a Westcam on the side, you'll be able to pick out people's, the color of their eyes. Drones, are just different versions of a technology that's a camera that's airborne.
But then you've got to be transparent about it.
Right.
You have to let people know what's happening and not try to conceal this.
I think the challenge is exactly maybe what we're talking about, is understanding who's operating that drone. Because, as an operator, you could be, a kilometer away. You might not know who's operating it. And I think maybe the fear is, well, I don't know who is, and what are they doing? It's a valid question that we, that we have to sort of address. But again, the technology probably isn't quite there yet. And as we move towards these kind of questions, drone makers and drone technologists will come up with solutions.
I think there's a different context, though, in the case of protests, in that here in Canada, we tend to think of drones as commercial or civilian. But drones have a military history to them. Yes. And amongst activists, there is a perception of the military use of drones. So I would almost imagine that if you were at a protest and you saw a drone in the sky, it would increase tensions. It would evoke the militarization of police.
You think that drone was there to shoot you.
Or you would just feel that its surveillance alone was intimidating, because certainly the idea of police surveilling protesters is a very contentious political issue. So while I agree, if you can clear the 400 or the 401 in great time, that's an excellent use of drones. But I think there needs to be an open association, an acknowledgement that many people perceive drones as military hardware, not so much civilian or commercial.
Dave knows, hang on, I've got to get to Dave on this. You've got some experience on this.
Yeah, I mean, we sell our products to military, to police, and to civilian users.
Talk to us about Libya, though.
Yeah, so, actually through the Canadian government, we were connected to the the acting Libyan embassy or envoy to Canada, and had our system deployed with the Libyan rebels. And in this particular case, again, they couldn't afford full-sized systems. And again, we don't arm our systems. It's purely a reconnaissance tool. But, we're able to train users across the language barrier and kind of deploy in the next day or two.
And what did they use your drones for in Libya?
Literally just looking on the other side of the hill to see who's over there. So it's sort of on the self-defense side.
They did not arm them? No. Could they be armed?
For the very small. Dark
Yes.
Yours.
Yeah.
You could not. Okay. All right. Understood. Let's talk about hobbyists for a second, because I know we started with this example of somebody standing on a public sidewalk and then basically having their way with the drones. Should there be, Ian, a requirement to have some kind of specific license to operate a drone in the same way if you want to operate a car, you have to have a driver's license?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, there is regulation, and I think the regulation is still very misunderstood by a lot of people. Right now, if you're in a commercial operation of a drone, UAV, Transport Canada has UAV, unmanned aerial vehicle.
Okay.
Transport Canada has a set of regulations of which you have to follow. You have to submit an application for every flight. It's a task to do, and those exist right now. However, for the hobbyist market, Transport Canada have really backed off and said, we don't want to regulate the hobbyist market. There is the Model Aeronautical Association of Canada, who are people who have guidelines for people who operate model aircraft and have for decades. So there are rules in place. They do feel like they're kind of yesterday's rules for today's problems. And Transport is trying to address this. They're coming up with new regulations, and licensing will be part of that.
I see Anne shaking her head here.
I don't disagree with you at all, Ian, but those rules are still, in terms of aviation-related issues, I don't think they extend, not yet, to the surveillance, the potential for massive surveillance.
But I don't think Transport Canada wants to be part of that. That's not what they do. They're aviation
I don't care
people.
who does it, but it's got to be addressed.
That's fair enough. But at this point, there is no Transport really aren't privacy experts. They're aviation experts, and their main goal is safety. Safe operation of something that flies, whether it's 2 inches off the ground or 200 feet or 2,000 feet. They want to know.
But with due respect, they can work with the Office of the Privacy Commissioner, Federal Commissioner. They have wonderful staff there who could assist them in developing that. The fear is, and people always say, well, that's so far off, that's never going to happen. The notion of a surveillance state, that is what threatens our freedom. Free and open societies, which means even though obviously when you go out in public it's different from your home, we all get that, but people still don't have a notion that just because I'm in public, the possibility of me being tracked is perfectly acceptable. We have to have an open debate on this, and I think we have to have some rules associated with this. I don't think we want to become a surveillance state, and the threat of that is looming. We have to address it.
Should you need a license as a hobbyist to operate a drone?
I think yes. And I think part of the reason is the surveillance issues. I think part of it is, flying a drone over the Gardiner may be a really easy thing to do, but also a rather stupid thing to do. And I've seen it, in part because I live in a condo beside the Gardiner.
You've seen drones over the Gardiner Expressway?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Do you know whose they are?
No, I can see the operator, yes, but I don't know his name or his address.
Or what he's up to.
And this is why no one, I think, would jump on a motorcycle or get into a car without at least some level of driver training, if not passing a driver's test. I think it's totally reasonable to have the same thing for a drone operator. It could be a website in which they go to the website and fill out a form and prove that they know it. Like, it doesn't have to be onerous, it doesn't have to be bureaucratic, but it's very powerful technology, and I think asking people to use it responsibly is a perfectly legitimate social contract that we would ask.
Dave?
The first time that a drone crashes on the Gardiner, because anything that flies will crash. It's just stats, right?
Physics.
So what goes up will come down. And if that comes down on the Gardiner and create, there will be big problems. And then all of a sudden, the rules will change, and they will change fast, and not in the good direction, right? So that's why it's very important for us. In the industry, we actually we often refrain from using the word drone simply because of connotations. We try and work with our operators to make sure that they're operating safely, because again, to be in front of it, and I think there's opportunity on the regulation side to get in front of the privacy side too. As Ian said, Transport Canada runs a process, the Special Flight Operations Certificate, SFOC process within Canada, injecting an element in there where they essentially assess each operation that you're doing. Okay, how does that work with respect to privacy? And there will be locations you can operate. If you're flying in a park, as people have for the model under the MAC guidelines, the model aircraft guidelines, the requirements that you'd need to operate there are very different than the requirements you might need if you're filming a video downtown Toronto.
I get you, but tell me this. I mean, presumably 10 years down the road, when we're all accustomed to seeing drones flying over all of our highways, and it's second nature and nobody gets too excited about it, but before we're there, we're here. And my hunch is if people saw drones flying over the highway, that could be very distracting and cause accidents.
Absolutely.
So what do we do about that?
That's a challenge, because I think it's cultural education is the single biggest piece that you can, the fastest step to take, I think.
I say, you go on YouTube, you can Google CN Tower and drones. You'll see like 4 or 5 videos of guys taking drones to fly around the CN Tower. It's absolutely crazy. You know, they're within a kilometer of City Center Airport. They're at, 2,000 feet almost with these systems. It is an education thing at this point to tell these people what you're doing is not only stupid, it's also dangerous. It's dangerous for the people on the ground, it's dangerous for the pilots in the air. There's RF signals going all around the city and tower. Who knows what's going to happen?
Radio frequency.
We're
radio
leaving
frequency.
An important piece out, though, and it was sort of alluded to by that video that started our segment, that we're entering into a new era of the internet in which these drones have to talk to each other. In fact, we need a network that allows the machines to communicate with each other. The cars, the planes, the helicopters, the drones. And there will be such a network, probably run by Google. But the idea is, when your vision of when we have drones flying over the highway, how do we know they're not going to crash? Because the drones will be talking to each other, talking to the cars, talking to the sensors in the road. And this Internet of Things that will allow all these machines is part of the both privacy and safety framework that regulates this. But we're talking about now the transition until we get there. And that's where, we're talking about how do we get humans to use it. I'm thinking, it might not be humans. Humans won't matter. It's how do we get the machines to respect each other and the machines to respect the law.
Humor me for a second. I do want to talk about humans for a little while longer here. You had to deal with politicians, obviously, during your 20 years as Information and Privacy Commissioner. What was your sense about their level of knowledge in this area, their ability to make laws in this area, their understanding of what would be required to make sure that we get all of this?
I always found they were very receptive when you made it real, meaning your family, your children, your acquaintances could be captured in this way. And, we're starting with video surveillance cameras in the olden days, moving forward to biometrics, facial fingerprint recognition, etc. So I think they get it when you take the time to present it to them in a very accessible way. What are the real life consequences? And how could this impact our society? How could this impact, we have Section 8 of the Charter of Human Rights, Canadian Charter, and it says everyone should be secure from unreasonable search and seizure. How can it relate to that? How could that impact and negatively impact our freedoms? They get that, and they know if you're pulling the public, they're going to object to it. Every time. People want freedom.
Gotcha. Let me read this here. This is from Transport Canada's, I guess, equivalent in the United States. This is the Federal Aviation Administration. They have this advisory circular that they've put out. This one's old. This is more than 30 years old. For model aircraft operating standards, you have to select an operating site that is of sufficient distance from populated areas. You have to give right-of-way to and avoid flying in the proximity of full-scale aircraft. Use observers to help if possible. I mean, this seems like pretty common sense stuff, but these regulations are more than 30 years old now. Do we have a problem here?
I think, it's a case where technology has outpaced regulations, and that often happens, right? Technology is moving at the speed of business, which is often very different than the speed of politics. And you're seeing a proliferation of UAVs and drones because the cost has come down so much. When a drone was $1 million, this was not an issue to anyone. It was a very different problem. And now that you can go to your local, computer store and buy something for a few $100, it dramatically changed things to the point where, you were flying an aircraft that was much bigger, so you couldn't fly it downtown because you couldn't take it off. It had a little gas engine and a 5-foot wingspan. You're not going to fly that down Yonge Street, right? But the fact that now you can pull something out of your pocket or pull something out of your backpack and you can get into it for a few dollars, it means the technology is way further ahead than those rules were made for.
That is being updated. In 2015, the revised version of that applicable to drones will be coming out. But even with the revised version, it still remains unanswered, the surveillance-related questions, because it's the FAA. They deal with aviation matters. They don't deal with the surveillance issues. How will this impact the public? So that's why, as I mentioned, 36 states have enacted separate legislation addressing the use of drones or UAVs for purposes of domestic surveillance and specifically prohibit it absent a court order or warrant. So I think you're going to see a lot of changes happening because people are when you look at polls on this in the United States, everyone is opposed to any use of drones for purposes of domestic surveillance. They like it, you go to another country, you do it for safety purposes, search and rescue, all the good reasons you identified. But for purposes of surveillance of people, they say no.
I think what's interesting on that side, talking about Seattle, the reverse of that happened also in the US. A guy was flying a drone along a beach, just kind of minding his own business. Somebody came up to him and attacked him, physically beat this guy up because they were spying. He was spying on them. He completely, doing his own business, nothing illegal. He was just doing it for fun. He actually got attacked by a woman who said she was being spied on by his drone. So there's also a knee-jerk reaction a little bit when a drone comes into play. It's like, must be doing something bad. Must be doing something.
You get that, I presume, right? That's a natural inference.
It can be. I mean, I think as the technology gets adapted, people will get used to, like you're saying, 10 years' time. I don't think people will be talking this way.
Look, obviously, I don't think the guy should have been beaten up in that case. But if I'm lying on a beach and I see a drone, one leaps to conclusions that what the heck is that doing? Is it capturing my image
But you're
here?
on a beach. I mean, everybody can see you.
No, I'm sorry. Not you're on a beach.
That,
you're on a beach for leisure purposes. You're not on a beach to have surveillance cameras.
And that's my point about our sense of publicness is changing.
Right.
That we still think of this idea that the public is the town square where everyone is able to say what they are. But no, we're in public when we don't realize we're in public. And when we're on the beach, we want to be able to wear a swimsuit without appearing in TMZ. And that's why I think drones really evoke that confusion. They evoke the messiness of our times, that we are simultaneously public and private.
I mean, I agree. It does exactly that. It will kind of make things, obviously you're on a beach, you're in a public spot, there's camera crews doing God knows what documentary on something.
There's still an expectation of privacy even if you're in public, right?
Especially in your bathing suit. And a lot of us don't want to reveal what's under the bathing suit.
We're in public spaces. I mean, there is a limited expectation of privacy, I wouldn't say. And some people may say there's no expectation of privacy. You're in public. I mean, you're walking down the street.
There's different versions of public spaces.
Well,
and I would happily take this to a poll on what people's expectations would be lying on a beach in their bathing suit. What would they expect? Would they expect anything like that? And I would debate that.
But I mean, people are taking holiday pictures all the time, with their cell phones.
That Yonge and Dundas Square does not necessarily mean that you're public. That I disagree. I think that there's a generation that's growing up in digital spaces that they see as private. And when they are in public, and if they are looking into their phone, if they are hanging with their friends, they're in private. And if you take a photo of them, you're violating their consent, you're violating their privacy. They didn't give you permission to take a photo. I'm now in the public here on public television, but I signed a release form that gave TVO the permission to film me here in the public.
Fair enough, but you're also talking a generation who are posting everything on Facebook. I mean, I'm not sure I 100% agree with that.
With due respect, the research coming out from Dana Boyd, University of New York University, she is saying, au contraire, the kids who are now using Facebook, they have a much stronger sense of privacy than you ever believed. Yes. They have different ways of protecting it than you and I would, but there is an enormous strength in privacy, a belief in privacy in the young people that is mistakenly thought to be gone. That's not true.
I think there's another thing that causes drones to evoke such a strong reaction, and that is the almost anonymity that comes with it. If you're standing there taking a picture of your family on the beach, you're standing there with a camera, and everyone can see that that's your family, you're taking a picture with them, they're consenting. If you were doing that same thing from a mile down the beach, maybe of your family, no one knows that. Right? So there's a different scenario.
And I think that's very important because I think the issue of who is operating that drone and what they're doing with it is a critical difference. I mean, on a public space, people can wonder what's going on. So I think that has to be addressed. When we are operating, we're very visible. Our company car has got big logos on. We're wearing fluorescent vests. We're as visible as we can be. So if there's any questions anybody has, they know who to come to. Sure. It's not always possible, and paparazzi and dare I say others may want to hide what they're doing.
It's interesting. The expectation is that because our kids put so much of their lives online, we think they don't care about privacy at all. But you're saying that's not the case, and they actually would object if somebody else were taking pictures of them on the beach.
What I'm saying is that the research that is coming out in the last, say, 10 years, certainly in the last few years, is showing that kids deeply care about their privacy. But you have to understand, kids, they don't have economic interests like adults might. Their interests are different, so privacy is highly contextual. You have to incorporate context, and for these kids, and they've been growing up in the digital time, they find all kinds of different ways of protecting your privacy that we would never even probably think of. So there's a keen, deep interest in privacy in the kids. It is reflected probably different ways than we would, highly contextual. And to me, that's the refreshing part. And it's not surprising. People need moments of privacy and solitude and intimacy.
Even if they're in public.
That's right, as well as connecting. You need both. That's why you've got to have this positive sum mindset.
And with young people, it's obvious. They don't want their parents to know what they're up to. That's perfectly fine if their friends know every moment of their life, but never your mom and dad.
That's right. They want the privacy from the parents, not their friends.
The 360 video is another issue then for privacy, because that's filming everything. You know, when people are sitting in public, and you know, Google obviously has that with the Google car. One issue we may have talked about is as a Google car drives down your street, you can look into people's houses. I mean, the resolution's getting better with Google, and it sort of is that you know, as invasive as a drone, probably. I maybe
and
argue
countries like Germany has completely objected to that. They've completely said no. So it depends on jurisdiction, context, lots of difference.
I see a future for a one-way glass manufacturer, for houses, for apartment buildings, condos. Anyway, we've got a couple of minutes left here, and Jesse, let me throw this your way. Dr. Melvin Kranzberg, who apparently people in your world know very well, but I'm learning about for the first time here, a professor in the history of technology at the Georgia Institute of Technology, and apparently his first law of technology says, technology is neither good nor bad, nor is it neutral. I need you to explain that to us, and then tell us how it applies to this conversation we're having tonight.
The medium is the message, is I think exactly what he's saying.
Okay.
The tool shapes the task. If you have a hammer, you're going to look for things to hit. If you have a cloth, you maybe look for things to wipe. And I think that was the point Anne made about drones and surveillance, that Transport Canada thinks about transportation. FAA thinks about aviation.
Not privacy.
But in fact, they should be thinking interdisciplinary. So the idea that technology is not neutral, nor is it good, nor is it bad, says we have agency. We can choose to use this technology in very empowering ways, but this technology is going to change us, and that there's no going backwards. Like as soon as people realize that they can see from above, well, they're not going to say, okay, I don't need it anymore. Same way if a young person, you know, joins Facebook, has lots of friends, they're not going to leave, even though they do value their privacy. So it suggests we're in a one-way direction forward, in which if we don't bake in privacy by design, it'll be very difficult to, after the fact, reintroduce a culture that respects privacy. So it's important in this formative era that we think about the social concerns in addition to the technical concerns.
And you want the last 30 seconds to wrap that thought up?
I couldn't agree with you more, of course, Jesse. We have to get rid of the silos. It's the siloed thinking. So the FAA thinks of aviation and transport. Once we get rid of the silos and look at the potential harms that could arise, we can address the issue in a proactive way, embed the necessary protections, privacy by design, but that allows multiple functionalities to work at the same time. I'm not opposed to drones. I'm saying I want drones and I want privacy. It's not get rid of the verses, this whole dated zero-sum view of it's this or it's this.
We can do both.
You have to do both.
Okay. That's where we leave it. Thanks, everybody, for joining us tonight here at TVO. Appreciate your time.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.